Why meditate as a trader? Why is it so critically important to add meditation into your daily processes? So I see so many traders that just totally disregard this as a key element in your daily process. And these same traders are actually often struggling, and they're not sure why they keep breaking rules, why they keep having great success and then blowing out, why they can't handle losses, why they keep breaking their rules and taking trades that aren't there and then getting scared and not taking the right trades. They can't understand why they keep feeling like they're on the cusp of making progress, the cusp of becoming profitable, the cusp of complete success and actually doing this as a career, a full-time job, and then blowing out and going back to the start. So you're just going round and round in circles of failure. And it's really frustrating when you're in that process. I've been there. I'm a trader, so I've been through the journey, the horrible journey to become a successful, profitable, consistent trader. And it's a journey that is very unpleasant. It's really frustrating. It's painful. Okay. So when I see traders that are not meditating, and I know they're not, because they say things like, the common question is, what is your daily routine like? Well, I wake up, get some coffee, and then I go to the charts, hit the charts, wake up and hit the charts. It's just, you have to go, what are you doing? Okay. And what it tells me is that there's strategy and there's psychology. And these traders are putting all the emphasis on strategy because they're racing to the charts. They want to see what's happened in the charts, and they want to do analysis, and they want to focus on charts, price, candlesticks, whatever, and see if their edge is working. And it's all about the charts and all about the strategy. There's the other side is the psychology, and you've probably seen it's a common concept within trading that 90% is actually psychology and 10% is strategy. So first of all, a lot of traders are not just ignoring the psychology. They think that they'll just figure it out and focusing 100% on the strategy. Error number one. Secondly, I think many traders just, it's not your fault if you're still in this bucket. I was here. Okay, I'm speaking from experience. I wasn't born and could do all these things. I had to learn the hard way. But we ignore psychology because we don't really understand what it is. So when we hear psychology, we kind of think of it as clinical psychology. It's deep-rooted psychological issues. We think of it as something wrong. We've got to fix what's wrong, and we don't even know where to start. And what do we have to kind of unmask there, and go and see some professional person and kind of fix ourselves. That's not what psychology is in this instance. In trading, the psychology part, 90% of your success factor in trading, the psychology part is what we actually call social psychology, not clinical psychology. So clinical psychology is where you may go and see a psychologist or psychiatrist and have issues, psychological issues. Okay, we're not talking about that. We're talking about social psychology. And social psychology, broken down into a very simplest form, is just behavior. It's human behavior. And social psychologists actually study human behavior. There's really cool experiments, often more on group behavior. So some of the common ones you might have heard of is that there were, in the 70s, pretty unethical psychological experiment, but they put some university students into an experiment for, I think, 7 days. And they made half of them the guards and half of them the prisoners. And then they observed the behavior. You'd never be able to do that experiment now. But what they found was really profound behaviors that were common with not being anything to do with you as an individual, i.e. your clinical psychology side of things, just how people generally behave given a certain environment, circumstance. Okay. And it was, you can go and read, it was, I think, a Stanford University experiment, really interesting results. But basically, the guards just went, just were out of control in the way that they took the power that they were given and just went extreme on it. And the way the prisoners behaved were just the way they kind of like identified with the groups they were put in, and it's quite an interesting experiment. And the results are quite interesting. I wouldn't want to be part of that. But another one they did was they put two children into a room and they gave them two marshmallows each. And they said, we're going to leave the room and you can either, now I can't remember the real details of it. It was something to do with you can either eat them both now, or you can wait until we come back and then you can have more marshmallows. And what they're basically trying to see there is how kids behave with, delayed gratification. And then I think they studied them a bit later. This isn't clinical psychology. This isn't something wrong with these kids. This is just behavior. And some of our behavior is a little bit inherent to us, meaning it's very personal. So the way I behave in a certain environment is different to the way you might behave. But it's still behavior within, 30% might behave like me, 30% might behave like you, and 40% might behave like someone else, okay, or different behavior. It's not that they're trying to say like psychologically the way I behave is wrong. It's just different, okay? So we're talking about just behavior, very standard behavior that we as humans have. And when it comes to trading, we also have behaviors that we manifest under the environment we're put under as traders. And one of those behaviors is the way we behave under stress or under fear. We just don't behave as we would normally behave. So when you're hitting those charts and you haven't really reflected that when you open that chart, 10% is going to be what you see in the strategy, and all of that's great, and all the knowledge you have, and you know a lot. You studied these charts, you can analyze a chart, right? Okay, 10% is that. 90% is our psychology, our behavior in that environment when we are faced with a chart. And there are experiments that they've done where they've tested that when we're exposed with a chart, we've got to make decisions, and then we've got to allocate some money and take a risk. There's an enormous amount of pressure. When you hear pressure, read fear. The way we behave is fear-based, doubtful, uncertainty, because we're in the environment of a pressurized environment. And we sometimes don't realize how pressurized that environment is. So the experiment they did was they checked the blood flow. I don't even know how they did it, but the blood flow to the cortex, this front part of your brain, which is developed as humans, we've developed frontal lobes that is where all our kind of critical thinking is. So that 10% of looking at charts is done from this part of the brain. The 90% is done from the amygdala, which is somewhere in the middle of your brain. And the amygdala is a leftover from your caveman days. So it's it's where your kind of fight or flight response comes from, or your rest and digest response. It's an instinctive response. And it's triggered when when a bear came into the cave, or a flood came raging down the canyon, and was going to take out your cave. As cavemen, we used to think and behave like that. We didn't really think; we just reacted. And this is a really powerful part of us being human. It keeps us alive. It keeps us from not doing things that are dangerous. So it's a really important part of being human. But we have to understand that as developed humans, we now have technology. We now can jump onto a chart and trade. Our caveman brain is still active. And instead of seeing a bear and then triggering the fear response, it sees a chart and it sees us having to do something, take a risk, and possibly be proven wrong. It triggers an enormous amount of fear in us, and it triggers that part of the brain. An experiment they did was when you're faced with a chart, the blood flow from the blood flow to this front part is actually restricted, and all the blood flows to that other part of your brain. It just overpowers the critical thinking part of your brain. Okay, so let's just do some basic maths here. 10% of what you're doing is using that part of the brain and your strategy and the knowledge you have. Let's call it IQ. All the study you've done on charts and everything. Nobody's saying you haven't done all that study. You haven't spent hours and hours, going through charts, doing back testing. You've done all the work, but you're frustrated that you can't make it work, because when you actually are faced with a chart, faced with trading, that 10% is then diminished because your brain that manages that 10% is diminished, and the 90% becomes even bigger. And the psychology, which is just your behavior, your human behavior, which you kind of have no real control over, 90% is in full control. So when you're just jumping on the charts, you're actually out of control. You might think you're being in control because you're still you've still, you haven't gone to a pile of a puddle on the floor out of fear. The fear is almost not registered. You almost don't register that this is going on, but it doesn't make sense otherwise. If you think about it, how frustrated we've all been when you're like, I'm so frustrated. Why can I not follow my rules? They're not that hard. This isn't that hard. It's not like we're doing rocket science and quantum physics in the computer. We're looking at candlesticks, levels, certain things happen at certain times, and we're frustrated because we're like, why can I not follow my rules? And I've been there where you're just like, it's so simple. Like, I can do this. Why can't I do this? And it's because of that unconscious, I call it the lizard brain. The lizard brain is in control. Okay, so hopefully it's clear why this is happening and why you're kind of unaware of it, because that lizard brain is sitting in your head and controlling it and being like, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure. Yeah, go for it. No, run, don't run, blah, blah, blah. Who knows what that lizard is doing. But let's move on. How do we solve this? Okay. So first of all, you need the awareness that this is happening. So maybe don't just rush to your charts. Think about how are you going to get your lizard brain under control. You can't undo this lizard brain. It's really, you can't become unhuman. You can't unhumanize yourself. Okay. So when we're not psychology wise, we're not trying to fix ourselves, because there's nothing really to fix. We're good as we are. Okay. It's important that you're human and you've got these things going on. We've just got to figure out, how do we manage it while we're trading? Okay. So first thing first is to just be aware that this is happening. So hopefully you can change your daily routine and not rush to the charts. Or if you still love rushing to the charts, don't have access to your brokerage account. Just put it somewhere else. Put it in a different room. Just separate that ease for your lizard brain to just be like, come on, let's do it. Put it somewhere else so you can still look at the charts and just get an idea of, what's going on. Okay, then you can pause. And then the best way to get in control of your lizard brain is to overpower it. Okay, so going to overpower our lizard brain. How do we do this? Let's think about what our lizard brain is doing. It's a fight or flight response that's going to happen. Okay. And fight or flight is either you're going to force trades, you're going to fight it and, be overly aggressive, take trades that aren't there, you know, or you're going to come out with a bit of a flight response. You're going to run away, fear, uncertainty, doubt. You're going to, that feeling when you just have fear. When we have it in other situations, maybe you turn up to a party and you don't know anybody, or you've got to do a speech in front of people, or you've got to write a test. We all know that feeling of fear, doubt, uncertainty. They're very negative emotions, okay? So what we want to do is we want to trick our body into a positive emotion. We want to trick it into a strong, powerful, confident, you've got all the feeling of I can do anything in the world. You're feeling very confident and strong and capable. Okay. Now, the only way to trick yourself fast is to basically trick your body into believing that you're in a situation where you feel like this. And the best way to do that is to find an old historical memory that gives you that feeling. And you can do this really fast through meditation. So you've got to practice your meditation. You've got to be able to calm yourself, just find a little bit of space in the craziness of life, so a little bit of focus and space, and then you go down into a very calm place, a room. I like to use a future room where my future trading self is sitting, cool, calm. It's everything that I want to become, and you know what it feels like to be in that Zen, confident space, and then you go into your past memory and you trigger, your whole body should feel what it felt like when that memory happened. So for me, my memory is driving to my first job interview after university. It was a make or break event, like getting this job at this prestigious firm would change my entire future. It was like my future in finance was set if I got that job. And I worked really hard at preparing for it, but then I spent time meditating and imagining myself in these interviews, speaking to these people, convincing them, showing them what kind of colleague I would be and how I would manage with clients and this and that. By the time I drove to that job interview, I had a song that I can just recall like that. I had this feeling of complete calm, complete control, complete power, and I just knew I was getting this job. I just knew that I was the person they wanted to hire because I represented everything that they wanted in their firm. If I would sit too long in my room and look at everything on paper, I wasn't that candidate because I didn't necessarily get the top marks at university. I didn't do all the right things. On paper, I was a bit like, I had imposter syndrome. I was like, why are they even interviewing me? And that's the lizard brain that I could have gone in with. And they would never have hired me because they would have been like, this person is going to crumble under any kind of pressure. But I prepared myself so well. So when I drove to that interview, I just felt like I'd already won. I had this amazing feeling that I almost feel right now because I'm thinking about it. And that's the memory I go back to because that's the state I want to be when I trade. I want to feel like I am the trader I've always wanted to be. I'm the trader that everyone would look at and go, that's the kind of trader I want to be. Look at that person trading. I want to look at myself and be like, I want to be like that trader. And that's how I feel when I trade, because I meditate and I go back to that memory and I trick my whole body into being in a complete rest and digest, cool, calm state. And it lasts long enough to trick my little lizard brain while I'm trading to just follow my rules. And I've got very clear rules. I've got very clear entries that I can see it set up and be done and dusted with my entire trading day within an hour or two. And if I start feeling any doubt, any kind of, oh, actually, why is this confusing? I'll just go back to meditating, because I've lost control of that management of the psychology behavior side of trading. And that is why you should meditate. So let me know, drop in the comments what you think, if you meditate, if you're going to start. And for me, it's one of the things that changed the way I trade, and I do it every single day. Sometimes I really struggle to meditate. Sometimes I have to take a little while to take a few attempts because I've got so much going on in my head and I can't find that little bit of zen, quiet space to kind of get to the memory. It doesn't mean you're going to be a guru meditator every day, but most days I can get to that feeling and I can bring it into my trading immediately and trade the way I want to trade. And it stopped me from breaking my rules. It stopped me from having confusion. It stopped me from feeling the doubt and the fear. And most importantly, it stopped me from that just, why can't I follow my rules? I now understand how I can follow my rules. And that's the power of meditating.